This week, Miss Mandi hangs out with Muthoni Maingi, an award-winning global digital strategist and currently the head of digital campaigns at Oxfam Digital.
You know those girls you like ignoring in the supermarket who are trying to sell you things? Or the girl trying to pitch you a new drink in the bar? That was essentially me.
After university, she began working with advertising agencies before discovering the immense power of the mobile phone to change people's lives as she shifted towards global.
We're ready? We can do this? Does it mean that I am essentially stalking people? Yes. This was the best part when you've run away from your cousins and now you're in the kitchen and somebody's like, come and taste it. And you're like, oh, well, shall I?
At only 34, she has extensive experience in digital as one of the founding members of the Bloggers Association of Kenya and was part of the core teams that launched Blaze and Little Cab at Safaricom.
Twitter back in the day was very innocent, trusting, and cool. Let me give the context, first of all. It wasn't rare for you to end up in a CEO's office or even in their house having coffee, tea, because it was such a tiny group of people, and it was a group of people that were open to engaging with people from different parts of industry, countries, as long as you're interesting. Ali Kansachi used to have, I think it was called Mind Speak or Mind Talk. And so Bobby, Kachwanya, and Ramadai had gone for it. Then they were having coffee and they were like, why don't we just start a Bloggers Association of Kenya? And so they sent out a mass email to a ton of people and asked, would you like to be a part of this? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's see how it goes. And it's gone really well. I'm very proud of it. The fact that it's now thousands and thousands of bloggers represented under it, that it's a civil society organization that actually campaigns and fights for rights for the Fifth Estate. The fact that there's an awards industry around it, but also even better, it's the idea that you could make money as an influencer, as a blogger. That is something that we worked very hard for in terms of getting corporates to understand that this was something to take seriously.
That was a great market day.
It was.
I absolutely love market days because fresh produce absolutely inspires the meals you're gonna make. We got some spinach, tomatoes, lemons, garlic. Is there a rule you have when you go grocery shopping? Do you wash your stuff first and then put it in the fridge, or do you cook and wash it?
No, I wash as I'm cooking.
So does this mean you sanitize your fridge often?
Once every 2 weeks, but now you're making me think about that.
I think it's just because we kind of underestimate how even the water that's used to clean the produce. So I guess that's why I'm very cautious about that. But hey, I respect anybody who chooses their own jam. And speaking of jam, I think we should move on to our main ingredient, which is going to be the coconut chickpea curry. And I feel like it's only appropriate we wear some aprons before we throw it down.
Perfect. So we have the coconut mandi, we have our lime.
This is based on something we talked about earlier. You told me you like a little bit of tart, a little bit of sweetness. So we're also going to be adding some sugar as well. And I know the fact that you grew up in the coast, you love your coconut a lot.
And spices.
Okay.
First of all, I need people to understand that I got culture shock when I moved to Nairobi, especially on the food department. I don't know what that is, but it's not pilau. Growing up in Mombasa, it's nice, it's really laid back. I was an athlete. I used to swim a lot. I actually swam for Kenya. Mombasa is a big town, but also it's a very small town. You grow up literally knowing everybody, everybody's in your business, but also everybody really fundamentally cares about you, which is fantastic.
As a Coastarian myself, I didn't grow up in Mombasa, but I was heavily introduced to Swahili food, of course, because of visiting home. When I found out that Noni lived and grew up in Mombasa, that's one of the things that made me gravitate towards her. And I just knew I could pay homage to her flavor palette by, giving her some coconut rice, some coconut curry, adding in some chili, some spice, because I know us Coastarian girls can handle it.
I moved to Nairobi when I am 18 for university. It's a culture shock on all fronts. First of all, people do not like it when you greet them in Nairobi. They think you're about to rob them. Habari yako, umeshindaje? Niko nauliza, nimepotea kidogo, unaweza nisaidia? They're just like, nah fam, you're about to rob me. Which is the opposite back home. If you don't do those niceties, people get really offended. Over here, someone just wants you to be like, hey, sister, nimepotea. Nikifika hivi nendaje? That's enough. Then there's the food, the feeling of ordering stew for the first time and seeing a tomato and a carrot floating at the top can just, I don't know what to say, but it was a shock. I lost so much weight because I just couldn't eat.
Noni, I read something very interesting about you. You love to eavesdrop. What was the last thing you eavesdropped?
I think it's been harder to do now during COVID with social distancing, but I've been eavesdropping on my neighbors a lot who are either having a building project at midnight or like something shady is going on.
Do you find yourself being judgmental to people?
Everybody's judgmental. I think it's just different levels of judgment and what you choose to do with that judgment. Because it's one thing to judge somebody, and then it's a completely different thing to now start dictating how people should live, you know, setting up laws and policy because you feel a certain type of way about somebody else's life and lifestyle.
Yeah. The first time I met Noni, she not necessarily scolded me, but she kind of put me in my place of the fact that I didn't know what I was talking about. I remember trying to tell her something about like Facebook data, and she just looked at me like, that's absolutely ridiculous. That would never work. And she just came with like a whole roll of facts. And I was like, wow, I'm not well read about the things I was speaking about.
You could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the networks, you don't have the social capital, really you don't go as far as others, right? But the internet gives you access to those things without much money. I'm such a big fan of Elsa. I love the fact that she has an iPhone 6, she's in her house eating crisps in her bed, and she's been able to do everything that she's done just using that as a tool, using that as a platform, using that as a space. Typical social capital in African context is, you know, oh, my uncle is so-and-so, or what the Nigerians call a godpapa. You don't need a godpapa with the internet.
You're an award-winning digital strategist, right? Outside of that, you're currently working on your own company. How has been that transition, and what is it that you've learned in the corporate world that you really want to add into your media company?
I've always been a consultant throughout my career, and I think I've been lucky to work for companies that encourage you to explore your passion and your talent outside of what you do. Obviously, within due reason, you have to give disclosures, there's no conflict of interest, so on and so forth. So while I was in agency, I used to really enjoy being on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, and my colleague who was the web developer, the same. So we were always talking, we're sitting next to each other, but we're actually talking on Twitter or somewhere else. And our boss always used to catch us doing that. So she said, if you want to keep your jobs, sell a proposition that makes sense around these technologies to my clients, and you get to keep your job. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun. That should be easy. Telling companies that they should open Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and engage with their customers, right? And so I fell into that field accidentally, fell in love with it, have been in it for eons since then. Yesterday, I was laughing with somebody and I was like, oh my God, I'm actually writing a press release to send to the PR team so they can look through it and be like, this makes sense for this publication, this doesn't make sense for that publication. But that level of detail is not necessarily a level of detail that I go into in corporate, but also, again, it's my personal style. I'm not a micromanager. If I hire somebody or somebody sitting under me as a direct report, I expect you to just get things done. And obviously communicate if you're struggling with something, but I want you to get things done, and I also want you to own the project from start to finish, because then that allows you to actually own the successes, the lessons, and the fact that it also gives you visibility within the organization.
The onions have softened, and from this point on, you can add in some ginger garlic paste and then add in the spices right after.
Okay, perfect. How much do you like to cook your spices? I heard that it's nice when you let them sort of like smoke a little bit to sort of like release some of their oils as well.
Yes.
Right? I use the same as me.
I also feel like they add like caramelize the onions so much better, or whatever you're building, it just adds a depth of flavor that wasn't there as if you were adding in the spices at the end, towards the end.
Right, yeah.
And the fact that you travel so much, is there a particular country that you visited a couple of times just because of the food that they have there?
Not so much. I would say that I love the food in India, in Mexico, because I do love my spice. But my absolute favorite African country as far as food is concerned is Madagascar.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, because they have that French, African, Chinese, and Indian influence. And so the food there is just very, very thought out.
So the spices have cooked out for just about a minute. We can add in the chickpeas at this point. We've added in the chickpeas. We're just gonna let these get to know each other with the spices before we proceed with our coconut cream. And I know for a fact you love your veggie bowls. Is there a veggie you actually don't like though?
I would say I really struggled with okra for a very long time. I didn't like the consistency, but I discovered how to make it the other day where I could actually eat it and enjoy it. And so it's basically boiling it with your meat for hours until it softens, almost like making a broth. And then using that, with the typical onions, that you then add later on to make sort of like a saucy, stewy type meal.
And is there a Kenyan dish that you struggled making as well?
Chapos. Partially also because I don't like them.
You don't like chapos?
I don't feel like I gotta revoke
your Kenyan card.
my citizenship, but I don't like them, and so I've just never been bothered.
So what's a Kenyan dish you really love?
I love mokimo. I like your ndomas type of thing. At this point, I think I'm just going to come across as very biased, but it's true. I like Coastarian food. It's like the best thing ever, right? And when people think of Coastarian food, I think they imagine that it's all very, Arab or Indian boring, which it is in some respects. But you also have other interesting things that are also very informed from Bantu culture. So you have things like mseto, different flavors that just marry into just amazingness from breakfast all the way to dinner. Eating is a big deal in Mombasa. It's a really big deal. It starts very early in the morning. I know here you go to the kiosk, you buy eggs and bread. In Mombasa, you get eggs, bread. And you also get mahamri and baazi and all these nice things. You have kaimati, you have options, literally. Break time, and what we used to do is we used to mash cassava crisps and viazi karai with ukwaju, with chili, with everything in it. And then you have lunch, which, again, it's the coast. The options are infinite. Then snack time is still, again, viazi karai, but by that time, bhajias are done, so you can also have bhajias. And then you have dinner. So yeah, you spend pretty much a significant chunk of your time eating.
We all have go-to meals that we can make that take less time, but are still very enjoyable. What are some of your go-to meals?
My easiest one is definitely a wrap. So I'll always have some kind of protein in the fridge that's easy to just grill, throw in a salad or some kind of veg on top, and just wrap it and eat it, and you're good to go. And you've basically gotten everything that you need in terms of a balanced diet.
Do you have any boundaries when you're in the kitchen?
I don't like cooking with people.
Why? Okay, let's add in some coconut. As the chickpeas have already caught onto some flavor, you can add the coconut cream.
Okay. Why don't I like it? It's my space. Literally the spaces that I use and use a lot of and consistently. It's actually the kitchen and my bedroom. Okay. I'm rarely ever in the other spaces. And even when I am, I use them for work. So for example, I don't have a TV. I've never owned one. I owned one when I was 21, but ever since then, I've just never owned one. And so the living room for me is the space where I work and work out sometimes. And then the bedroom and the kitchen are where, it's zen, it's my space.
And speaking of working out, at some point you were vegan for a year. What did you learn from that whole experience of being vegan?
For one, you had to learn how to use different cooking techniques because it can get boring very fast. I was a vegan for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. It was fun. I liked it. I learned a lot. But also, I went into veganism not the right way. I didn't go through a nutritionist. And it's one of those diets that you shouldn't do if you don't go through a nutritionist because you could end up malnourished, which is what happened to me. So went back to eating animal products and meat, still in that space, but also still eating a lot more plant-based than I do eat meat in general. So that's essentially been my journey through food. I learned a lot of cooking techniques from, Vietnam, from Asian cultures specifically because they're also very good with vegetables. But also I began to learn a lot of techniques from us, from Africans as well. Because we don't realize it, we're actually a very vegetarian continent. Africa is it is the lowest meat consuming continent in the world. And so it's easy to find vegetarian recipes. It's easy to find inspiration as far as vegetables are concerned.
So we're gonna pour in some of this water.
Okay. Do you want to start or just like all mixed up? Sour.
And then we're gonna let things simmer for like about 15 minutes and we're gonna be good to go. You consume social media, I feel like, in two different ways. From a fun perspective and also the fact that you're a digital strategist, you consume it that way. Are there important people you've curated onto your timeline that can give you a lot of inspiration to keep doing what you do?
I feel like Instagram is the kind of space, if you're not careful about in curation, it begins to get to your head. It just is. It's aesthetically built in that way. And so for me, it was important to follow not only women that I find inspiring, say from a career perspective, but also women who are living lives that I enjoy watching them live, right? So I'm not there thinking, there are days where you just feel inadequate, right? And then you open this app and it's like, hashtag goals all the way through, right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so it's nice to follow people where you're just like, okay, not only am I inspired by your journey and everything that you do, but also I like the content that you're always presenting and it doesn't seem like it's a facade. It's okay to be essentially authentic. Just because you're in corporate, you don't necessarily have to speak in a certain way. It's very funny. I meet people and they're like, oh, you work at that level, but your accent. Right? People are expected to have a specific accent and all of these things. I think when I was younger, that used to get to me. Now I'm just like, honestly, if you're interested in working with me, if you're interested in giving me money, how I appear, as long as I'm not being offensive, rude, tardy, etc., is besides the point. The kind of job that I do requires that I understand insights from very different people. Whether I agree with you or don't agree with you, I'll still follow and, try and understand, like, what is the logic behind some of the things that you're saying and doing? What are some of the behavioral shifts in different demographics, be it age, be it gender, be it, the different cultural or class background that you're coming from? What are the interesting things that you're doing so that if we're plugging in, say, a comm strategy or product strategy, I actually have an intimate understanding of different people. Does it mean that I am essentially stalking people? Yes, that's my Twitter.
Our chickpea curry is seeming like it's come along great. I know you don't like to add in your sugar. I know you're against it, but today we're gonna break the rules just a little bit.
When I'm cooking for other people, I like to cook how they eat. I don't impose my
cooking techniques. Well, today I'm putting you onto my hacks.
Okay.
So we're gonna be adding in just like a little bit of sugar. This is gonna add in the sweetness. And again, you also spoke about like tart. So we're also gonna squeeze in just a little bit of lime and let this simmer for like another 2 minutes and then we can be ready to serve.
Perfect.
If you don't have a lemon squeezer, I highly advise that you squeeze your lime or your lemon with your hand. That way you can be able to catch any seeds. And also we're gonna be serving this coconut curry chickpea with a little bit of rice and some spinach, keeping it the rainbow bowl just like the queen has requested. I feel like her and I had like a place where we met. We had synergy, food-wise, because when she talks about veggie bowls, I can completely click because I really love veggie bowls as well. So there is a synergy of like food that belongs between the two of us.
As women, especially growing up, Kenyan and African, you're taught that there are different classes of women, right? And women who are respected and women who are not. And if you do this, it's that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're really actually all going through the same stuff or going through the same struggle.
She challenges me to learn more about my industry. Like she challenges me to actually be knowledgeable as opposed to just speaking just to speak.
I don't want to leave that legacy for anybody else coming in. It's not saying that you must be a certain way. It's actually to say that all of us deserve a seat at the table. All of us bring diverse strengths, which essentially means that we're all going to look diverse, including having a massive hand tattoo.
Speaking of a seat at the table, I think before we serve the food, you should taste test.
I grew up in kitchens, different kitchens, aunties' kitchens, your grandmother's kitchen, your mom's kitchen. And like this was the best part. when like you've run away from your cousins and now you're in the kitchen and somebody's like, come and taste it. And you're like, oh, well, shall I?
And I think it's part of like Mombasa culture. You'd find like a loose mahamri, a loose kaimati, and it's just like the perfect like reward for all the work you didn't do in the kitchen. That is it.
Oh, this is good. This is perfect. I like that the chickpea is still a little bit crunchy. It's not overcooked. And also just that coconut surprises you at the end and the tartiness of the lemon. Fantastic.
I think we're ready to serve, and I love that you've talked about a seat at the table because I want to go back and pick up on that conversation. We're going to be joined by one of your friends.
Yes.
And I feel like I would not do her the same justice of introducing her like you would. Go ahead and describe your guest for us.
So Ogutu is a friend that I met at a friend's house. Again, having a meal, sharing a meal, and we just hit it off. Right? And so the next day she calls me, she's like, hey, I really loved your energy. Come to Coco Jambo, let's have some meat. I get there, one of her other friends is like, should we go to Coast? And I'm like, why not? Booked the flight, everything. I had just met her the day before and her friends.
On the same day, you guys booked a flight. Wow.
Booked a flight. Our friends had some apartments in the Coast. We stayed there for the weekend. And ever since, we've just been really, really great friends. She's actually a Forbes 30 under 30, actually was the only Kenyan this year on that list. She is an MD of a petroleum company. And so I think she's an amazing person to not only have a conversation about, the seats at the table and, the difficulties that you face, but also just a really great all-round bubbly person.
I mean, if you met her through food, this is going to be a great experience of me meeting her as well.
Something that Mandi did that I found very interesting is how she made her pilipili kanga. Because I tend to always blend mine first and then fry it. But she cooked it whole, and I think that allowed for the spice in the seeds to stay intact by the time it was being blended. And so not only does it have the flavor of the curry powder and everything else, but it also has that punch.
When ladies get together, they spill the tea, they inspire each other, and they also cheers, ladies. Cheers, 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 cheers. Cheers. I am so glad you've gotten to join us. Since Noni spoke so highly of you, right? What have you been inspired by from Noni?
Friends really radiate a side of you and sides that also you don't really see in yourself. And with Noni, what I really, really love about her is Noni puts herself out there. Noni, I think, is one of the people I'll say has such confidence, and it's not that fake esteem or fake confidence. It's truly emanates from deep within herself. And I think that's what kind of radiates her and makes her be able to do such great things and get along with so many people, because when you love yourself, then you're able to share that love with others. And so that's what I have learned a lot from Miss Noni here.
I love it. And speaking of loving on yourselves, let's love on this food that we just thrown down with Noni.
I don't even think it's just friends. I think it's just women who are very keen on not coloring inside the lines. For me, that's the most important thing, because for the longest time, women have been conditioned to be all about the respectability. Then you meet these three women who are just like, let's break the barriers, baby. Let's go all the way. That's the energy I need to be around consistently.
I know Noni has a hack around her spinach that she has to put us onto as we're serving.
Yes, so you know how sometimes spinach, when you cook it, it does that thing where it coats your teeth and makes it, it's almost like a feeling, right? So what you do is you squeeze lemon while you're cooking or after to just get rid of that.
She's never put you onto that.
Kitchen hacks are so important because everybody has them and everybody knows them, but what about if we started to share more of them?
Yes.
So that's fantastic.
Also, we're pairing up this meal with mojito. So we have a mocktail here that's super simple to make and it's tangy. I love that Noni mentioned that she loves her food and her tart so much, so we had to make sure of that.
This looks really good. So who made this?
Both of us.
Both of us. Why did you?
Hey, wow. I'm like,
do you like your food spicy, Gotu?
yes, I love chili. I love lots of chili. I think that's also an acquired thing. Because of working out of Lagos and Nairobi, so they, Nigerian food and chili, it's just on another level. This is really good. I'm very big on textures. I think food, the biggest thing with food is textures play on, different, like tangy and sweet. And what I'm feeling is like the coconut comes out really nicely. I like the chickpeas. I've never, also Noni's my other friend who always is getting me into vegetables, So a lot of times you'll think maybe a vegetable meal won't be too good, but this is really, really good.
The math is definitely mathing.
Every good experience involving food just changes the dynamics of how people get to hang out. Powerful women get together and break bread and enjoy food, and that's what it's all about.
The chili is hot, the food is bomb, and the girlies are on fire.
I love it.
She's contagious. She's contagious.